Hello and welcome to another Tesla update video. Today, as usual, we'll discuss Tesla. Let's talk about the market and what's happening as usual. We had some boring days with the stock, but recently it's been pretty anything but boring. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button. Financial advice: I'm not a financial advisor, but my YouTube membership section is live at the link below for $2.99 a month. You can access all my posts, thoughts, updates, and sometimes I'll post other things like today's PayPal post. If you're interested, it's not really nothing. Tesla closing the day in the green, believe it or not, with the market being slightly red, up about 0.5, which is a bit of a shocker. Now, the reason I say it's a bit of a shockers, let me go ahead and see if I can find it really quickly. But yesterday, as I'm sure some of you, if you pay attention to what, happens on Twitter or X or whatever, Elon was a little bit of a, not good. Let's just say that right yesterday. He posted all these things where essentially said, I'm uncomfortable growing Tesla. To be a leader in AI robotics without having 25 voting control, the voting control is not the same as having 25 ownership, if you will, of the company, right? It is different. I'm not super nuanced in that. But for I understand, it is a different thing, but somewhat tied together. But also different nonetheless. The point is he was doing all these posts yesterday and let's just say he caused a bit of a storm for me as well. Like, a lot of people were extremely just going pretty critical about this and what does this mean? Why would he ever say this is he essentially blackmailing his shareholders or, whatever. So anyways, I'm trying to make here is that quite a storm last night occurred over on Twitter X, whatever, by Elon. So honestly, having us in the green today is a nice little surprise, but we started the day quite red, down about 3.5%. I think we interestingly bounced almost to the T at the same level that we bounced all the way here on the left with this left shoulder. Don't forget, we're still potentially setting up this inverted head and shoulders now. As I said, we gapped down again and then came down to the same level as this gap over here, right before a huge rise. Of course, things don't have to go this way, right? A lot of people thought this candle on Friday was that candle that would, essentially begin the rally clearly. That wasn't the case, but nonetheless, we did end up actually bouncing pretty much exactly where this bounced, and so far, it looks like a pretty okay candle. And the main thing to note here is the fact that we did go from red, pretty red actually, to green, which is great to see, especially on a day where the market is pretty much flat or red. Nice to see that right bit of an outperformance by Tesla, which is a rare thing nowadays, it feels like, but that's great, right? The main reason I bring up the whole red to green is because, well, we closed above yesterday's close. That's a good sign to me. That's important, and arguably just as if not more. Probably more important, in all honesty, is the fact that we held the trend line right. It looks a lot better on the weekly. Let's go on the week. Looks a lot cleaner here, in my opinion. But we held this trend line right. We broke, and we gapped down below the trend line. We oversold it and then shot back up, recaptured the bottom part of the bottom trend line, right? And we held above it. And we closed above it, at least the daily. We'll see how the weekly closes. That's the most important thing. It is a shorter week, but I really need to see how this weekly closes this week. Itself, essentially, obviously, by Friday, right? Friday's close, because we're still on the ire, though. Even though this was an extremely crucial recapture today, we're still on thin ice, and the main reason I say we're still on thin ice is because, well, we still have the green line here, which is a 200-day moving average, or the 200 moving average on the weekly, right? That's number one. We're barely holding above it. It's around, what is it right now? 28.5. Pretty much, we're at 220. Just shy, right? Not very far from it. Pretty darn close to it. So we want to really make sure we hold that. That's important. On top of that, the actual trend line itself is pretty much roughly where the 200 moving average is, which is also pretty much around the 218 is give or take level as well. Also crucial that we do not close the weekly candle below that, because there's always a possibility that we get this nice little pump and then it just fades into the rest of the week, but we ended up closing below it. Now, things look a lot less stable and bullish overall, because remember that if you look at the daily chart, the MACD crossed bearish over here, the green cross over the red, and it completely sold off. To be fair, as I said before, the MACD isn't always this good of an indicator, but in this case, it worked out beautifully. Frame is likewise twisted to the right and downward. That's something that's a little concerning here, because again, we have a cross to the downside. It's been crossed to the downside pretty much ever since this real sell-off really started back here. And so far, it doesn't really show any obvious signs that, it's going to stop. It's going to decelerate. or it's going to essentially go back up the other way. So we're still technically bearish on the MACD on the weekly, which isn't really good. So there's a lot of bad news, but there's still some good news right again, so you have to take all this into consideration. To understand the position that Tesla is in, the way I look at it is pretty simple. Right now, I just want to see how the weekly candle closes. Do we close below the 200 moving average and or really below the pretty much 218 really, which is below the trend line or not? Or do we hold? That's the question, and assuming we hold well, that gives us some hope into earnings coming over for next week, maybe even a rally into earnings as well. But ultimately, that's the most important thing I am personally looking at now. When we did gap down today, notice that this is blue line, that's the volatility adjusted price from pretty much the lowest points all the way down to when we were shockingly close to $100 per share. It's a fairly respected VAP, and we've bounced off of it a few times before finding strength and pushing back above it. We've also bounced right around it over here and held it fairly well. Now that we're back at it again, will we again bounce off of it, or will this time be the time we finally truly collapse below it? Nobody knows for sure, but time will tell as usual. So and react accordingly. Overall, this is how I see it. The way I see it, I did de-risk today, and then I re-entered because Tesla held where I wanted it to with a very tight stop loss, basically where Tesla is at right now. The only bullish thing about the situation is that if there's a place to bounce, if there's a way to maintain Tesla's bullish case with potentially the inverted head and shoulders, and really just overall the overall chart perspective, if you will, to still keep it looking bullish without it. If it falls below this and closes and starts closing below this bottom part of this overall massive weekly since all-time highs wedge that we are in, it will be ugly. It's like Tesla will return to possibly the mid-100s. Like, it really wouldn't shock me. I honestly don't think this is the place for a rally, but if it does happen, it has to happen here. In other words, it's pretty much do or die for Tesla. As if it doesn't find a place to rally and we just continue to decline and close below the 200 moving average and 218, that won't be good. It would require fairly significant earnings to effectively turn this into a false bearish breakdown and turn it into a bear trap. There used to be some pretty large whales, but they have since vanished completely. The only ones left are this massive one for 881K premium 270 calls. 220 calls. That expires on January 19th, which is this week, and the February 16th 210 put, which is almost 700K in premium. Aside from that, there are a lot of very small players, small beers and bulls that are kind of following along, trying to figure out where the hell this thing is going next because, well, it's going to be interesting. Overall, though, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit the like button. Run for quite a ride over the next week or two, so buckle up going along. Trying to figure out where the hell this thing is going next because, well, it's going to be interesting. Overall, though, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit the like button. Run for quite a ride over the next week or two, so buckle up.